Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. This show is brought to you by Simplifying, which has been helping build trust in travel for over a decade. Through in-depth conversation with aviation leaders, Sustainability in the Air breaks through the current clutter and provides a clear roadmap for the future. It's about time we embarked on creating a net zero future for the industry, together. This season of the podcast is brought to you by Carbon Click, leaders in managing carbon offsetting programs for top global airlines. Without further ado, here is your host, Shashank Nigam, CEO of Simplifying.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air. Our next guest is Greg McDougall, who is the CEO and founder of Harbour Air. Harbour Air, as many of you might know, was the first commercial airline in the world, first scheduled carrier to fly electric. Greg, you piloted the E-plane between Vancouver and Victoria, if I'm not wrong.
Not yet. The initial test flights have all been local to the Vancouver airport.
Okay.
Because our permit only allows us to fly in that.
So you piloted the E-plane way ahead of anyone else. What was the personal motivation there? Why go electric?
Well, I think, to sort of step back a bit, Harbour Air has always been, and me personally, have always been an early adopter of technology, which is a bit ironic considering the age of the fleet that we operate. A lot of the aircraft that we operate are actually older aircraft, but they're all updated, and any retrofits or anything that can be done to them to make them more state of the art, we've done it all the way along. But we find the airframes that we're currently operating are still very economically viable, and that's why we're looking to retrofit them to electric. But generally, the sort of the ethos of the company has always been to try and stay ahead of what we think is disruptive technology, and I've been a student of it. I got interested in that a long time ago. I was the first guy to have, not the first guy, but one of the first people to have an iPhone in Vancouver before they were even. I had to go to an American system to get it. I think I was the second Tesla in Vancouver, the S Tesla. So I'm always kind of looking at the things that I think are going to be changing the way we do things. And in this business, I think that's important. And I think a lot of it does revolve around the environmental aspect and the fact that we operate in and out of harbors that have become neighborhoods. So the big destinations that we have, downtown Victoria, downtown Vancouver, Nanaimo, the bedroom communities of the Lower Mainland, most of those places are neighborhoods, and they have now, which they didn't 20, 30 years ago when we first started. They didn't have, it wasn't a lot of sort of residential real estate there. Now there is. I mean, Whistler's another example. So we're very, cognizant of the fact that we have an impact on those neighborhoods. And so, if you take it down to more of a micro level from the macro level, which is the environmental impact overall, we've always made it a priority for us to try and adopt whatever technology was going to lessen those impacts. So this was kind of a natural progression for us.
Yeah, I love how that personal motivation to be a first mover is translating into Harbour Air being a first mover.
Yeah, and the thing about Harbour Air is that it's very unique in that, I mean, not only the fact that we are, basically a regional airline that flies completely off the water with flow planes, but our stage lengths are very short. And our equipment is, a lot of it's single engine, so lower consumer of energy and lower carbon burn anyway. So that allowed us to actually, kind of pioneer the idea of carbon neutral, and then the next step being the electrification. And if you look at the technology as it exists today, with lithium and sort of pure lithium solutions, the range and the payload are quite limited for those applications as they exist today. But as you go along and as you go through this process, that's changing all the time. I mean, the batteries that we are looking at for our 2.0 version, which we're building now, will have 50% increase in available energy compared to the ones that we're currently operating in the current prototype. So it continues to evolve, and so but these things we recognize take time to get through the regulatory environment and do all of that. So at the first flight that we do, that will be an actual paying passenger, which we hope to do within a little less than 2 years. The change in technology will be fairly dramatic. In fact, we may even be into hydrogen fuel cells by then. We don't know, but lithium today, as it exists, is good enough for us to complete the mission, at least in some form.
Right, exactly. You mentioned two things that I want to dive into. One is the going carbon neutral. The other is the e-plane. Let's talk about the e-plane first. The e-Beaver, as it's called. What made you partner with magniX? What were the decisions you were making around going and piloting with eBeaver? Stage lens technology, what was it?
That was kind of a no-brainer because I had started talking about this transition or trying to pioneer this commercial electric flight in enough places that I think magniX heard about it and they recognized that, well, there was a potential partner for them to achieve their goals, which is getting the actual motor and power, the whole power plant system certified. So they automatically gravitated towards us and kind of came in the door and said, well, our goals are completely aligned here. We have the resources, we have the engineering is already done, the motors exist, and we need to get them certified and the battery, the battery pack certified. But they don't make the battery pack, but they make the motor. And so we need to do this, and we also want to be first in terms of flying a commercial aircraft. So, there was like a 15-minute meeting where we decided we were going to do it. And so also they brought up a lot of economic sort of viability to it as well, because they already had a lot of the things that we would have had to spend a lot of money on to try and recreate. So it was a totally compatible relationship right off the bat and really a no-brainer. The challenge was to sort of marry the two things together, which are, I call it the laptops and the wrench twisters. So we have the wrench twisters, they had the laptops, and we had to marry that group together and actually achieve the first flight, which actually worked really smoothly. And we had it done in like nine months from the time we decided to do it. So that in an aerospace environment is a pretty short time.
Wow, that is amazing. 15-minute decision making, 9-month execution. I think that's unheard of in aviation. You're right. Was it an uphill climb when it came to getting staff and board convinced about this, or was this an easy win for you?
No, it wasn't. I was in a pretty enviable position of being able to be the only decision maker in the company, at least at that time. So that was easy. The bigger challenges, of course, are and continue to be the regulatory environment and convincing the regulators that these things are doable and safe and all the rest of it. And actually they've been very cooperative, because I think there's also a wish for them, they want to see it happen as well. So it's not like we're pushing against, artificial barriers there, but there are the regular barriers, which are, well, what about this and what about that? Because we haven't done this before. And so we had to find a way to adapt regulations to be able to permit the sort of the evolution of this standard type certificate, which is kind of the thing that you would use if you were converting a piston to a turbine or so it's a process that already exists, but very different because of the fact that the propulsion system is electric and nobody's done that before. So those are the challenges that we have to overcome along the way, and they're not, they're not insignificant. But at least there is a process, and willing partners on both sides, on all sides, politically. The regulators. I mean, everybody wants this to happen. So at least we're all on a team, and we're all pushing in the same direction. But that doesn't mean it's going to be without its hitches along the way.
Right. No, that's really good that you have a lot of these vectors that are aligned and going in the same direction. You said within 2 years you will have hopefully the first commercial flight. How long before most of the fleet is converted to electric? Are there some big challenges getting there?
Yeah, so that again is an evolutionary thing in terms of the development of the technology. And if you look at the flights we do, our main routes over to Victoria and back, and then Nanaimo and back, and Sunshine Coast, and all these local routes, they can pretty much, a lot of them can be done somewhat practically with existing technology, as I said before. Anything further, like down to Seattle or Comox or Tofino or the other routes that we have, it's going to take longer for the technology to probably evolve to allow us to do that. So basically, the fleet would get converted as the technology allows us to do it, and all of this has to be based in sound economics as well. So I think that any airline is when they're looking at doing these things, it has to review the practicality of doing it and staying viable.
Right. Do you foresee, Harbour Air became the first commercial airline to operate an E-plane. Do you foresee Harbour Air will become the first airline to have only E-planes, or do you think there'll be a mix of aircrafts?
I think that's possible. But again, it depends on the evolution of the technology to allow us to do it. And also, it may become evident as we go along, because this is a changing environment that, right now the retrofit is really the way to short circuit a lot of the process, because of the fact that the airframe is already certified. So putting an electric propulsion system on it is not as daunting a task as building a clean sheet aircraft. But it may become economically viable for us to start using clean sheet aircraft that are in process right now. There's one called Airflow, which we're looking at. That's in a prototype. So working towards a prototype stage, which is a utility aircraft that could meet our sort of market demands. So it may be that we'll use aircraft like that in the future, but right now it's still evolving on the retrofit, and that's charting the course for everybody really coming along in terms of the regulatory environment and having it certified.
Yeah, you mentioned the new platforms, and I have been speaking with a lot of new platform company founders who are developing new airplanes, new eVTOLs, and things like that. Hawaiian, for example, just signed a deal with Regent electric gliders. Are there some brand new platforms you're evaluating, and how do you separate the smoke and mirrors versus the real things?
That is interesting, because 2 years ago when I was talking about this, or two and a half, 3 years ago when I first started talking about this, it was falling on not deaf ears, but people kind of looking at me with very, very skeptically, and it was not anywhere close to what it is today in terms of it's the flavor of the month, and there are so many aspirational things going on in this space. There's all kinds of jargon in the industry now, liars, fakers, and battery makers, and whatever. And so it's kind of now evolved into something that is very aspirational, and there's a lot of money flowing into it. But at the end of the day, the achievements that have to, or the hurdles that have to be dealt with are the regulatory side, and I think you might have seen, I don't know, but the FAA just announced that they're going to change some rules in terms of the certification process there, and that's not making it easier. It makes it harder. So so there's different things going on that happen when you're in uncharted territory. And so those things can definitely put up barriers that cost a lot of money and cost a lot of time and all the rest of it. So keeping it simple is kind of our motto, which is, we're just retrofitting an aircraft with an electric propulsion system. And all we have to do is prove that it's as safe, if not safer, than what we currently use. So that's kind of guiding principle.
Right. No, that's definitely a good way to start. Let's talk now about carbon neutrality. You were carbon neutral back in 2007. 2007. Not 2017, not 2027, and not 2050 for sure. Um, Firstly, why so early? And secondly, how did you achieve it?
Well, it's interesting. Back in 2007, I think people were starting to turn their sights towards, being more corporately environmentally responsible. And I think that, as I said before, I think, I'm proud of the fact that our company is quite innovative and and so we were thinking about, okay, well, what is it we can do here? I mean, because we're in this unique position of burning, less carbon, and people had been talking about these carbon offsets, et cetera. And in bigger airline environments, not without problems, because when you're offering a passenger a $50, $60, or $100 increase in their ticket as an option, they're probably not going to. Well, some will, but a lot won't choose it. If you build it into the ticket price, as we were able to do, and not really have to raise our prices very dramatically at all. In fact, it was, at the initial thing, I think it was about $1 a ticket, if that. To do the offsets, it becomes a lot easier, and then you're making it mandatory. You're not making it optional. So we had the ability to make it mandatory without inflating our ticket prices too dramatically. And then also to be able to offset our corporate burn was not a big deal either. So we were able to, do it in an economically viable way for the company. So it was kind of like, why not? And stepping back a little bit before that, the reason that we kind of got interested in it was also an employee-led initiative. And they basically approached, the management of the company and said, we think this is a great idea, and that we'd be proud to work for a company that's that's the first and maybe only airline in the world to do this, and so why don't we look at doing it? And we said, well, why wouldn't we? So that's how it happened.
That is very interesting that you mentioned, you automatically included offsets in the ticket fare. Do you believe that it is the responsibility of the airline to offset their carbon footprint, or should it be voluntarily done by the passenger?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. But I think that it becomes pretty difficult when you're leaving it optional, because you can't say that unless you're prepared to make up the difference and say, well, the passenger didn't want to pay it, but we'll pay it. Then it becomes economically difficult. So in today's sort of world of airlines and their profitability or not, it becomes a pretty difficult choice. For us, it was pretty easy because of the fact that the numbers weren't that daunting, and it was a viable option for us. And we could also we were working with an offsetting company, which we still do, which has sustainability profs on its in its leadership, and prof from UBC, and so the validity of the offsets was not in question. Whereas there was a lot of stuff going on at the time of planting trees and various things that didn't really they weren't very tangible. And now the offsets are quite tangible and measurable, and wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the money coming from the offset program. So they're verifiable, and they're not a perfect solution, obviously, because you're offsetting, but they are certainly better than not doing anything. A lot.
Definitely. Which is the company that you're working with currently for your carbon offsets?
It's called Offsetters. In fact, I think they just changed the name, and I'm sorry, I probably give you the name, but it's called Offsetters, and it was founded by a professor of sustainability at UBC.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Yeah. What about other airlines? I mean, you're a unique case study because Harbour Air is small, it's regional, it can electrify its operation. What would you advise regional airline leadership to think about sustainability? Why should they be thinking about sustainability?
it comes down to this disrupt or be disrupted thing, really. And my view of it is, you don't want to be disrupted. You want to be the disruptor, and if at all possible. Um, so I think you need to keep your eye out for what's next. And eVTOLs and all of these things are certainly very well emerging on the horizon, and in fact, I think they're glaringly emerging. And I think that it behooves anybody in this business to not be sitting there getting blindsided by something. You need to be kind of looking at what is going to become economically viable. In fact, maybe more economically viable than what you're offering, and at the same time being environmentally viable and more environmentally viable than what you're offering. So I think, and I think we're seeing that now, that a lot of airlines are, signing letters of intent and whatever with these companies that are building or converting or doing whatever that they see as a progression to electric flight or at least a hybrid flight, which I think is going to be, the sort of the interim step. I mean, for regional airlines that have to fly, sort of within that 600-mile range, which we would call regional, really hybrid is probably more viable, at least at this point, because of the fact that, it will allow aircraft to do that pretty quickly. So I think at the very least, a regional airline needs to be looking at what's going to happen with that and what's available to them to transition to it, because it's going to happen. And if they're not offering it, somebody else will.
Right. Yeah. You got to be on board this train that is heading only in one direction right now, it seems. What about SAF? Because, like you said, there's going to be hybrid operations for some time. You can't be fully electric the day after tomorrow. Are you looking at sustainable aviation fuel as a part of the mix as well?
We have been looking at that. There are lots of challenges with it, not the least of which is the price of it. But we have been looking at that. In fact, we've been in several discussions. Pre-COVID. I mean, when COVID hit, everything just kind of like came to a grinding halt. We were talking to various platforms about sort of Uber model booking platforms and different things. And all of that just kind of came to a grinding halt when Uber came along. So, and then we were in discussions with the sustainable fuels so again, those things, we stopped talking about them because we all retreated to survivability mode. So now those conversations are starting to happen again. And hopefully people have been toiling away in the background, in the meantime over, the 2 to 3 years of COVID. And they have some new things to discuss about that. But we're certainly interested.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to decisions, numbers is what matters, right? Do you have some numbers from your initial experiments? Like I said, you're the only airline in the world flying an electric plane. What are some of the numbers in terms of emissions, in terms of profitability for the aircraft? Are people paying a premium to fly electric? What are the numbers for Harbour Air, and are you able to share something?
Well, they're pretty difficult to make specific numbers, but generally, electric motors versus the current turbine engines that we use, the sort of cost of conversion would be pretty similar, but the ongoing operating cost would be dramatically lower. You've got in an electric motor, you've got basically no heat or very little heat. In a turbine, turbofan, turboprop driven aircraft, you have very high heat, 800 degrees Celsius, and that translates into a lot of expense because you've got all these coatings and castings and everything that have to be maintained for that high heat, and so that's expensive, and so notionally, the electric motor should cost a fraction of what the turbo prop does to operate, and let alone the fuel, obviously. So in British Columbia, we have the the luxury of being on hydropower, which is renewable and sustainable. So we're not burning any carbon to produce the energy that goes into the batteries, which is a big deal. And so the cost of energy versus the cost of fuel is dramatically different. So we think that in the long run we should be able to operate at a reduced cost of fixed cost and also variable costs, and so hopefully we can pass that on to the customer and grow our market, because we are a commuter airline.
Exactly. And I love how at the beginning you had mentioned not cities, not communities, but neighborhoods. You're helping neighbors build a livelihood. So that's really exciting. What about infrastructure? I mean, like with electric cars, you need charging points. What about infrastructure? If you fly, let's say, from Vancouver to Victoria, you need to charge it somewhere. And I'm sure you can't plug it into a 12-volt wall socket.
Not 12 volts, but the reality is that to get to sort of the goal, well, the initial goal is a minute of flight per minute of charging. So if you look at the battery system as we are forecast to kind of have in our 2.0 version, you'd be able to fly, half an hour with a half an hour reserve. You'd have to legally have a half an hour reserve. So you're only really charging the top 50% of the battery. So a 30-minute charge time is on the minute for minute theory is sort of readily achievable on a 150 kilowatt charger, which is less than Tesla. So the infrastructure already exists. I mean, even arguably the power requirements we have down on our docks, for a welding machine or whatever, are already at that same level that you would need for those chargers. Now, when you start doing it in bigger scale and doing a whole fleet, that becomes a bit more of an issue. But in our discussions with the people that that are advising us on all of this, and with BC Hydro and our consultants, that whole because there's going to be this big evolution in e-cars and all the rest of it, that's going to happen anyway. In terms of building that infrastructure and supplying more power in the grid and all that to sustain all of this conversion to electric. So we don't see that as a big barrier. We can even recycle batteries as power sources that can be positioned remotely. So you could theoretically, well, not even theoretically, you could practically take a battery that's not capable of flying anymore, a battery pack, it might have been cycled out or whatever, from a point of view of sort of the safety margins you have to build in. But use it on your dock, trickle charge it when the plane's not there in a remote location. Let's say that you have somewhere that you're not using as regularly, and then when the plane comes in, it just sucks the energy or the energy right out of that battery pack into the battery pack on board, and you have a much more rapid charging situation. And so and also you're recycling the batteries that are no longer serviceable for flight.
Right. No, that's great to know that the infrastructure that's going to power a lot of the electric cars is also going to help Harbour Air benefit.
Well, for sure. Yeah. And don't forget, I mean, our locations are mostly downtown.
Yeah, exactly. So that should help.
That's where that power is going to be required anyway.
Right, exactly. That definitely helps. It's not some remote airport stand that you have to go get electric power out. An interesting news I recently read was NASA is learning from your operations to develop its own electrical propulsion systems for aircraft. Can you talk a little about this NASA collaboration or work?
Well, it's mostly with Magniacs actually, and I've heard it. I've kind of heard about it ironically a bit sort of secondhand, and probably read the same things you've read. But Magniacs has a major cooperation with NASA, so it's through sort of our relationship with Magniacs that is happening with NASA, and but we're the ones making it happen on the flying end, and Magniacs is supplying the technology. So So yeah, it's interesting that if you think about the impact of this, I think it was really kind of a huge surprise when we first started, saying we were going to do this. Just how people kind of reacted to the idea and really got the vision of it. And when I did that first flight, December 10th, 2 years ago now.
And you actually flew it yourself, isn't
Yeah,
it? You
yeah,
piloted it.
yeah, and it made sense for me to fly it. It was my crazy idea, so why wouldn't I fly it? I've got about 8,000 hours in Beaver, so I was as qualified as any pilot we had. Maybe more so. They wouldn't want to hear that, but that's a legend in my own mind. So it made sense for me to fly it, but it was really interesting because it felt kind of like you're at Kitty Hawk or something. There was people all over the place and international press, and people really did sort of it really did sort of grab people's imagination, and I think that was a bit daunting, quite frankly, because we had a lot of pressure on us to make this work and have it happen. We had a lot of direct sort of hurdles there because we had very tight weather restrictions, and then we had a charger fail on us the night before, and we had to figure out how to fix that, and it was just the normal things that you would get sort of. But the weather was threatening us to not cooperate to the point where we couldn't do it, and we have all these people gathered and we won't be able to fly. But anyways, the heavens parted, and away we went. We got it done. But needless to say, I didn't stay in the air very long because I was kind of like, let's minimize the chance of something going haywire here. And it was very interesting. I mean, to see how people had kind of caught the idea of this and the significance of it, and it kind of but it was a bit intimidating in terms of we gotta make this work, and we did, but and exciting at the same time. So we've continued to to kind of keep everybody informed as we go along, and the progress. And of course, COVID did set us back. There's no two ways about it. And everybody working from home in their pajamas was not a good thing for aerospace. But also the supply chain issues now are an issue for our next sort of versions of batteries and inverters and motors and things. So
are you feeling a direct impact of the supply chain issues?
Yes, yeah, for sure. Because our suppliers who are supplying us with the batteries, H55, which is our battery partner, and then Magnex, they're also feeling those impacts from the supply of the components they need. So we keep getting pushed down the line a bit. But that hopefully won't last forever. And we're definitely being impacted.
Yeah, well, the good news is in this ecosystem, there are the suppliers and partners, customers, yourself with the vision, but also the government. I believe the BC government has promised to invest nearly $1.6 million to help you develop all-electric seaplanes. How did that come about, and where's this investment going?
Well, it's interesting. So, we've applied for any and all grants that we think that we qualify for, and so we anyone that we see that looks remotely like it could be something that would work for us, we've applied for, and thankfully the provincial government has stepped right up and said, yes, you definitely do qualify. In fact, you qualify in spades for what it is we're trying to do in terms of innovation for sustainable, and so they did a matching agreement with us. So every dollar we spend, they fund a dollar up to I mean, there's very tight controls on what it is and all the rest of it, but they've definitely been very helpful on that side. The federal government, although we have not seemed to qualify for, it's quite interesting how they certainly talk about their interest in moving to sustainable transportation and electric aviation, and all of these things are being mentioned, but So far, we haven't qualified for any of their programs, and so we're working on that still, and we're very hopeful and optimistic that they will pitch in, because I think it's super important for Canada to be seen as a leader in this. And Canada has a long history in terms of being innovators in aviation, and if you look at Bombardier and Havilland and all of the companies that the Pratt & Whitney, all Canadian companies, right? And groundbreaking, sort of Canadian companies in aviation. So I think it's really important that Canada, grabs this brass ring, because it's available to do. And so we need everybody on the team. We need, we need the regulators, we need the politicians, we need everybody, and we need all the help we can get from the funding point of view as well. And it's totally, all of this is totally achievable. So if everybody's sort of working together to get it done, it'll certainly go a lot quicker.
No, that's fantastic that you have the ecosystem support, definitely on the provincial level, hopefully soon on the federal level as well.
Right.
And
we're working on it.
What would your advice be to any other regional airline CEO looking to get started? Because it seems like a wild west out there in trying to make decisions today.
Well, it is, and everybody's in kind of different markets, and we consider ourselves to be a regional airline, but we're really kind of, everybody talks about urban air mobility. Well, that's us. We're already doing that. We fly into downtown cores, and we do that because we can land on the water in a marine environment. And in British Columbia, it's it just so happens that virtually every metropolitan area has a place to land a seaplane. So although there are places up the valley that don't, and they're well served by conventional aircraft, but certainly on the coast, that's when you're looking at taking a ferry for 4 or 5 hours from door to door, because you have to consider it door to door. That's how we kind of gauge our impact on the commuter market, or fly for door to door, maybe 45 minutes to an hour from your office to your home or whatever. It's kind of doesn't make sense for you to be sitting on the. Sometimes you take your car, it makes sense, but as a walk-on passenger, if the ticket is within your economic means, it certainly time is money. So I think once you start getting looking at the regional airlines in terms of what their markets are and how far they're going and all of that, I think they're all they all have somewhat different, well, not all of them different, but people have probably or companies have different missions, and the sort of logistics that go with being electric or or hybrid or whatever it is are different for different airlines, depending on what they're trying to achieve. But it's certainly coming, and as I said before, I think anybody that just ignores it and then all of a sudden sees that there's another viable disruption coming in terms of aircraft, they don't want to be blindsided by that. And they need to be a part of it.
No, definitely. I think the lesson I'm learning here is we have to lead from the front, and smaller airlines actually have an advantage here, because larger airlines can't fly across Atlantic or cross Pacific on electric, but smaller airlines can, and we have to take the lead. And I think you're leading by example. It's quite inspiring to see you go from your first iPhone and first Tesla to flying your own electric plane and piloting the first one. And it gives me a lot of hope about the future. And I personally can't wait to board my next flight on Harbour Air, which will be hopefully on an E-plane.
Right. Well, hopefully very soon. We're trying to get it done as quickly as possible. And again, proving the technology is as safe or safer than what we currently do is a high bar, but it's not a crazy high bar. And certainly with a team of people all pulling in the right direction, it's totally achievable.
Fantastic, Greg. I really want to thank you so much for your time and insights and inspiration. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. We hope you liked it and will share it with your network. Please also leave us a review. Awareness is the key to a green future. Your support will help our insights on sustainable aviation reach a wider audience. In addition, for every single listen of this podcast, we will plant a tree. And for every single review, we will plant 50 trees. You can also write to us at podcast@simpliflying.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website, simpliflying.com, and join the movement.